right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's Eat and Greet, where hopefully in the next hour or so, we're going to give you something that is absolutely worth the time that you took to show up. And I think that we definitely will, because today we're going to talk about the nodes. And I don't know about anybody else, but like, I love knowing more about my nodes because it just is like information that I feel connected to in a way that it's not just intellectual, but it drops down into something like quiet, like that quiet thing that feels like a heartbeat in me. So I feel like whenever we talk about the nodes, nodal transits, things that are happening around the nodes, there's a deeper connection to it sometimes for me than other pieces of the chart. And to help us walk through this beautiful conversation today, Miss Raquel Reyes is with us. So welcome.
Hi, hey everybody. Thank you, Stormie, so much for having me. I am also extremely excited to talk about the nodes. I would have to say it's just one of my absolute favorite things to talk about in astrology.
Absolutely. Well, and it was so funny because it's another situation where, I feel like since 2020, I've been able to really give a lot of credit to the internet for bringing people together because we got to meet through a summit. And then it was like, hey, wait, I'm really into the nodes. Let's maybe talk about that. And they come out to be the most timely conversations and the perfect topics. So I'm pumped.
Absolutely. Yeah, me too. And I was actually moving through an exact nodal square during the time of the summit. So there was some North Node magic going on around then. But yeah, I'm really, like I said, excited to talk about the nodes. Should we get into it and start getting into the nodal transits?
Yes, but first, I ask absolutely everybody who comes how you got into astrology.
Ooh, okay. Excellent question. And thank you for asking. So I'm actually a child of the cosmos, I like to call it, which basically just means I was introduced to astrology and tarot as a child. So when I was 10 years old, was introduced to it. My mom's side of the family, we're all Mexican with Mayan lineage. So that side is very, very mystic. So grew up on Walter Mercado, all the things. And I started studying astrology very seriously during a Saturn transit at about 18 and a half years old. And that was about 14 and a half years ago. And here I am today.
And you just, was it, because I had like a fair amount of exposure as well. And so somewhere in me, I knew all along that I would do something like this. I didn't know exactly what it was going to look like, but when you landed in your professional practice, did it kind of feel like coming home, or what was that like for you?
It absolutely felt like a homecoming, and it also felt like giving myself, perhaps for the first time ever, permission to really pursue a dream that perhaps didn't make sense to anyone else, but made so much sense in my heart. I'd never really let myself do that quite yet as an adult. So absolutely a really delicious homecoming on that one for sure.
Yeah. Oh my God, it is every single time. So yes. Okay. All right. You guys, we're not going to waste any time. We're going to get into these absolutely gorgeous slides. I just love that everybody brings these gorgeous slides. So thank you for that. And if you do not have a chart yet, please either pull a free one at astro.com, Cafe Astrology. There's a lot of places to pull charts. You can order a chart from me. You can order from Raquel. I'll make sure all of her information is down below as well. But you want to make sure you have your chart so that you can understand the way your nodes are working. We have these beautiful transiting nodes, but you want to know yours because that's what we're speaking to today. So let's hop in here.
Yes. All right. So let's get into this presentation. So we're talking about nodal transits today, and everyone, no matter who you are, is going to have three main recurring nodal transits where fated karmic events present themselves. And it feels a lot like an opportunity to really revolutionize our lives. I would say the nodal transits, what they feel like is a lot like time speeding up or the expediting of necessary changes in a quick amount of time. Usually nodal transits are marking really catalyzing important events that are going down. So again, despite where your nodes are, we all get to look at these ages and kind of reflect. And I want to jump right into that because learning about nodal transits, these three main recurring nodal transits, oh gosh, not only brought so much clarity to parts of my story that quite frankly, I had been having a hard time figuring out, but also made me genuinely excited about the possibility for the future and what the future could potentially be holding. So there's three main nodal transits. The first one is nodal return. We also get a nodal square, and then there's an inverse nodal return. So all three of these have different flavors, different functions, but here are the three. And let's start talking about the nodal return. So these are approximate ages. The exact age will depend, like Stormie was saying, on your personal transits, your personal chart, and you can easily find out when all these dates are going to be happening and the exact ages for you. But approximately the nodal return will happen at 18 or 19, 37-ish, 55-ish, and around 74. Now this is when the transiting north node connects to your north node. So much like the Saturn return or any return, it's the node returning home to where it was at the exact moment of your birth. Now, this is a time where, and I just kind of laugh because there's so much bigness associated to the nodal return and what we really feel. But I mean, in short, it's like the mission is illuminated.
Mm-hmm. And it gets clear really fast. And you start doing things that are characteristic of your node. At my nodal return on it, exactly, without planning. And my husband also has the same nodal return. We got married. And we both have nodes in Cancer. So we went and made more family.
Wow. Wow. Ooh, I have to tell you, I have like full body chills everywhere right now. That's incredible.
Yeah, you just start to do these things. And I think the interesting part about watching people, you know, from outside looking in is that they just go do things that are very characteristic of that node and of the house placement. And it's like, you don't even have to think about it. The awakening happens. And like you said, it's like sped up.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And it's a lot of evolution. And I think that for me, looking in on people moving through nodal returns, that's something that's really fun to watch, is that personal evolution piece, to see them grow and change so quickly. And the characteristics of the north node might not be the natural characteristics of the person experiencing the nodal transit too. So watching that play out is really fun and interesting. And I would say, let me know what you think, Stormie, but I would say the nodal return, it feels like things are definitely catapulting forward. In a forward progressive direction. Would you agree with that?
I do. Yeah, I definitely do, because I feel like the way that I express this and I talk about it with clients is you feel like you're going on the next journey. Like, and you're usually pretty clear what the next journey is, maybe not everything that's included, but you do have that catapulting, okay, I'm moving towards this. And if we think about that, I think very practically, starting at 18, 19, it's like one of the first times we take the opportunity to go or to do or to whatever from home, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And I was thinking 18, 19 for me during my nodal return, I actually opted to not go to college, which was the plan, what I was supposed to be doing. Sure. My south node is in the ninth, north node third. And I had kind of decided that like that wasn't my fate at that time, I guess. And another thing with the nodal return is a lot of confidence. I was very confident that college was not for me at that time.
Sure.
I had so much clarity that I feel led to a lot of confidence. And at that age, I mean, confidence is still something I work on. I think it'll be an inside job the rest of my life, but particularly at that age, I wouldn't have called myself a confident young woman necessarily.
Right. Oh yeah. Well, and it's funny too, because, you know, I look at that one and yes, I was taking a leap to go forward and to go to college and to do all of these other things. But what I did at 18, 19 was also I met my ex-husband and a tribe of friends. I have a north node in Cancer in the 11th house. So whenever a return is coming, I know that there's going to be a focus on a significant relationship, and a tribe of people will be surrounded around that, whatever it looks like. And so it kind of set me up to understand that as this time comes into my life, you know, like I'm on track, and to trust that. And I think that's where some of that confidence comes from for me around this timing too, is that it's like, Calgon, take me away, because I know we're going in the right direction, you know, kind of that feeling.
Yeah. And then, you know, the other thing I wrote down here was deep soul resonance, whether that is through meeting people that feel like they are your soul family, or even like, you know, in your situation, connection with a real soulmate, you know, and just that deep soul feeling of I can see my path. It feels aligned, and I might be already moving on it or taking these new actions that are sort of propelling me in that direction. So this is the nodal return. I've only had one thus far personally, but I'm really excited for the next one, definitely.
Yeah, well, I can't wait to see what you bring us, like what your experience is. I mean, I've had the opportunity to have two, and they're like, oh, okay, this is what's going on.
Yeah, and was your second very similar, would you say, to your 1st, or were they totally different?
Nope, they were very, very similar, because even though, you know, with my first one, I met my ex-husband, I started going to school, I was just headed in a completely different direction. And then that whole tribe of people who are still in my life today was formed at 37 when my current husband and I got married. Like I said, we were both having a nodal return. We got married, and we were with some of that same tribe of people who we had both met, you know, much earlier in our lives, and we were starting to physically travel in a whole new direction. So it had a very similar theme.
That's so interesting and good to know. Yeah. Okay, cool. So I'm going to move into the next transit. Are you feeling ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Excellent. Okay, so now this one is going to look quite different. We've got the nodal square. Now, visually, you will see there are so many more of these. The nodal return's about 18, 19 years. This one's about every 9 years. That's why we're going to experience it more. So this is when the transiting north node, oh, I'm so sorry. My presentation is wrong on this one, but this is when the nodal square is coming to square your north node. And like any square in astrology, the square is going to create what could maybe feel like tension. It could definitely feel a little bit like confrontation in your life. But there's also a lot of clarity that can be found should you decide to kind of go seeking in this uncomfortability or these situations that are presenting themselves. So there's, I guess I would say it sounds kind of generic, but there's a lot to learn with the nodal square. And it's not so much about like what you have to go do, but the nodal square is a really big invitation into sort of who we get to be at these sort of switchbacks every 9 years. And then similar to all the other nodal transits, this might be changing the tide of your life. So for an example, at 23, I moved to Los Angeles. And so literally at 32, I moved to the opposite side of the country and did a big cross-country move to Florida. Like literally swapped.
You're like, pack it up. You're a like pack it up every 9 year person, huh?
Apparently so. And the nodal squares, I also want to add the nodal squares, you know, sometimes pressure is exactly the medicine we need to get something cooking. Sometimes pressure with the nodal square comes at this really amazing time where, quite frankly, we might be looking around our lives at the time that the nodal square is approaching and maybe feel ready for a change or ready for something different, just ready for something new. And that's something that I've grown to appreciate about the nodal square.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I just love that. It's like sometimes the pressure that's there is exactly what we need. And I can tell you, like from the experience of a couple of my nodal squares, what those ones always feel like for me is the square does want my attention with some kind of action, but I'm really standing pretty face to face with what are my actions going to be. Right? It's like very much so, because for me, these ones too have had a similar theme. But it's like, but what's the action in it every single time? And that has led to some different results, which is pretty neat. And so I'll be coming, my next one, I'll be 41 here in just about 2 years.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I feel with the nodal squares, I always felt during them and the one I just moved through that I had to make big choices.
Yeah.
And I would definitely venture to say that some of those felt like tests where I was like, I hope I don't choose the wrong thing because these are really big, feeling like big pivot points here.
Yeah,
So,
at 32, I can tell you somebody that I really had spent a long time. We went back and forth with each other for a very long time. And at 32, at that square, that person came back into my life at the same time that my current husband came into my life. And I knew from my experience of the previous nodal square that I was like, I'm allowed to evolve. And what I told that person is, I just don't choose you this time, and I got on with a different life. So it was very much so. It was like I was in challenge. And that's only one example. You know what I mean? There were plenty of things at 32 that I could see myself choosing consciously different behaviors, thoughts, and actions around what was going on. And that was a big deal because I do think that the nodal squares show us our course of maturity as well.
yes. And I love that you said that because I was just going to say my move at 23, I moved to Los Angeles with what I could carry in my two hands and a little under $400. And I hadn't quite figured out exactly where I was living yet. But there I was on that one-way flight. And it was kind of messy the way that I did it. And my move at 32, oh my gosh, to say it was a more mature way of moving is like the understatement of the year. You know, we actually planned the move and so it was a much more adulting like
Right.
experience for me at that 32-year-old for sure. That square was definitely it was testing, but I also felt I had better tools,
Yeah.
to actually pass the test.
Oh my God.
Mhm.
Yeah. I love that. Better tools, less assumptions about the way things have to be. Like there's just better tools, I think is a beautiful way to describe that.
Yes, better tools, different options. So nodal square. Okay, and I'd love to move into the inverse nodal return now.
Yeah.
The inverse nodal return has a really special place in my heart. And I would say the inverse nodal return is where I just see such an astronomical amount of movement and change with the inverse nodal return. So approximate ages again, but this is going to be 9-ish, 27, 46, 65, 83. And this is similar to the nodal return, but it's inverse. So this is literally when the north node is connecting to your south node. So the north and south node always opposite of each other. And what I have highlighted here is that this is a wake-up call where our past comes to meet our present, so comes to meet us here in this present moment, ultimately to create the future. So when you're in the inverse nodal return, it's sort of a similar feeling of playing with timelines.
Yeah.
It's very spiritual. It's a little bit intense because there could be some closure, some endings, but ultimately it's to help us move forward. And one of my favorite parts about the inverse nodal return that I'm going to speak a lot on today is the fact that the gifts of our south node become very readily available. That might take some noticing, of course, on our part, but they do become really present and available. And I think that this is a vulnerable check-in point, absolutely, but it can offer us this beautiful, fresh perspective that, again, is going to help us and serve as the fodder, if you will, for creating that future and what we want it to look like. This is a big one to unpack, the inverse nodal return. I've got lots to share on mine, but I can't wait to hear about yours.
There is just plenty. Yeah, there's plenty to unpack. But I will tell you, at 27, at my inverse nodal return, it's just is so significant because I remember going to sleep, and I was not asleep though. I was in a dream state, and I was met with a guardian who was standing with a wheel, and he just kept spinning it. And every time he would spin it, something in my life that I needed to learn this time would come up, and if I could answer the question, then it would pass off the scene. And what was left at the end of him spinning this wheel were all of the rest of the things that I needed to learn. And I was very clear that I needed to learn them, but I didn't get to see all of them. But I had just demonstrated that my soul didn't understand those ones yet. And it was the neatest thing because before I woke up, the last thing the guardian said to me without ever moving its mouth is, "This is when your life begins today." And from 27 on, my life, when you look at the shape of it, is completely different. And the woman who woke up from that time has lived completely differently before. Not to say that my life previously was anything bad or to be ashamed of, but it was a complete rearrangement for sure. And it was my past and my present and my future as he was just spinning this wheel, and there was no judgment. It was just, you learned it or you didn't. It was very cool. It was very, very cool.
Yeah. I love the sort of concept of like a wheel spinning almost during the inverse nodal return, because it does have that eclipsey type of energy. All nodal transits really do, where yeah, it can sort of feel like the wheel of fate or destiny might be turning. And I guess I want to add that during transits like that, yes, it feels like destiny starts calling, but it isn't always the easiest to step into.
No.
You know, particularly the inverse nodal return, because it definitely feels triggering, I would say.
Yeah.
You know, it's triggering time.
Yeah. And for me, what I was left with is, that experience didn't happen and I just woke up and started to be different. It meant that I had to begin to really live in the way of my North Node. And I had to really consider those behaviors, and I had to consider surrendering the negative or less evolved side of my South Node that I was living out of, right? Because I believe that both sides are great and extremely useful, but it was work. Like I did not get the gifts of the life that I have today by not growing up at that moment. So it certainly, yeah, I had to sort through a variety of different ways I was approaching life at this time, but it was clear again that I had different tools and that I had done some good work already. I had learned some things already while I was here. So that's the other reason I think, Raquel, that I speak often about my idea of the universe actually being quite kind, and that it's like actually a cosmic conspiracy to help us do what we need to do when we can work with it and not against it so much, because I was granted a lot of grace in that moment to say, here, these things are done. Good job. Check them off. Let's move forward.
Yeah. And you know how they say when you change, how like, well, when we change, we grow, we evolve. They'll sometimes say, not everyone can come with you, or not everything can level up with you. And I think that's true for the South Node. Not all attributes of the South Node are meant to come with us in this time space reality. And it is safe to release some of them. And it's also safe to integrate. And that was probably my biggest lesson of the inverse nodal return, was integrating the South Node, which is why I really wanted to speak on that today. I used to, admittedly, when I was really young studying astrology, I used to feel really scared of my South Node, being younger and not really sure what it possibly meant for me. And I would oftentimes read a lot of literature. And at this time, there wasn't really like internet astrology. You're going to libraries and there's tangible books. So I was reading a lot of literature, and I wasn't finding a lot of literature on the South Node. Or really even the North Node, but particularly the South Node, and how to embrace it. So that's kind of a big focal point in my work, especially today, is embracing like the shadow, the South Node, and then integrating it in. Like, we don't always have to be going through a nodal transit to work with this energy.
Yeah, I agree. I teach my clients all the time. I'm like, if you feel stuck and you feel like you just don't know what to do, run towards your North Node. Take on qualities and behaviors of your North Node. You'll get the ball rolling. Because I do believe when we tap into like the soul calling for just even a minute, we'll click back like on track, just a little bit. And the other thing at the inverse though is that while that North Node's getting on top of the South Node, the South Node's getting on top of the North Node. And it's like, I feel like that is a motion of like that transiting South Node being like, okay, I'm going to suck your delusions out here. That's not.
Ooh, I love that.
It's like, go ahead and let that go. You don't need to be afraid to be this North Node. You don't need to be afraid to integrate these two, right? There's a lot. I think that transiting South Node is actually doing a fair amount of work up there as well. I mean, don't you think?
Oh, yeah. And I think with the South Node can bring things to the surface that need to be sort of dealt with in a way. And that can be uncomfortable. But when those things are made available to us, we get to work with them, like you're saying, and that becomes value,
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and I think you have some examples, because I can't wait to see the full.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So what I want to do today, I wanted to make sure that I could tell, the best inverse nodal return story that I knew. And that meant telling my own today. So I'm going to do something vulnerable and share my own chart and my inverse nodal return. But again, this is when I was 27. So that's the time of frame that we're looking at here. Here's my case study chart. So you can also look at this when you're going to approach your own natal chart, where you can kind of see how it might be done if you want to start looking at your transits. So the first thing, of course, is where are the nodes in the chart? So this is North Node Pisces in the 3rd house, which we see down here. And then we move up to South Node Virgo in the 9th. So this is the chart we're working with. And I guess I want to describe my life a little bit pre-inverse nodal return. I had been working as a writer's assistant, but I wasn't really being honored for any of my work. I felt very invisible, and I was in a longer term relationship that was headed toward engagement and marriage, and possibly a life that maybe looked a little bit more conservative, I guess, than maybe how I had seen myself, but that was the direction that my life was moving in. And so that's what I was up to pre-inverse nodal return. Things were very, I don't want to say cookie cutter, that feels like a negative connotation, but things were just very smooth sailing. Sure. I hadn't felt any need or desire to go out and drastically or dramatically change my life. I was just kind of hanging out. Now, some quick facts about the inverse nodal return. This is a really important part and something to consider. This often occurs right before the Saturn return, and so the events are often mistaken for Saturn return events.
Right.
This is important. This is important because people will say, oh, so you started this or that during your Saturn return, and the reality is it was actually my inverse nodal return. And I'm curious what your opinion is on this to consider, because this is a huge thing that I'm always reminding people of as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm so here for that, because I feel like the universe is kind. So I think our souls are made ready and prepared for the events and the maturity that Saturn brings in. Because I don't think that we could just do the Saturn return. I don't think that we can do that. So I feel like that nodal return, which to me is the story of the soul, happens, and it says, okay, this is where we're going. These are the events. Here's the work. Here's the action. And then Saturn returns and comes in and really makes it very clear that we need to level up these behaviors to get to that place. So yeah, I absolutely look at that as well, because that's just, it seems like the path.
Yeah, and I feel like if the Saturn return is like the catapult into real world maturity, then maybe the inverse nodal return is the rite of passage for spiritual maturity, or maybe more emotional maturity. And then the big questions for the inverse nodal return is, the South Node gifts are highlighted. Do we pick them up? And then when the past comes to meet the future, how do we respond? And then, of course, the big piece on potential endings or closures of longer term circumstances. So within the course of 5 months, I took my first solo trip to Europe. I went to Greece and made some massive decisions, and I filed an LLC that changed my life for forever. And again, this was all in the course of 5 months, and this was during my inverse nodal return. And I just want to remind everyone, I'm a safe Virgo who was not trying to change my life. I was like, good. So I was minding my Virgo biz, and these huge things happened. Here's a picture of me in Italy, in Greece, and the filing of my LLC. So what I want to do is I want to pull up this chart for everyone, and you can notice a lot of different things. There's so much to consider and unpack with this chart, but these were my transits when I received a call around 8 a.m. about going on this trip to Italy for the first time. Now, in my upbringing, we could not afford to travel. I'd only been on an airplane at this point, maybe once or twice, I think only once, and I was 27. So the idea of this opportunity calling in Europe was really interesting. And what it was there was this company that was hosting writing retreats for women, and they wanted me to come on a retreat and then interview me to work for their company. So it was a total opportunity. And it was involving something that I loved. So on this day, I booked the trip. I had no idea how to even really do it, So I booked this trip. Then my partner at the time, we decide, let's meet up in Greece a couple weeks later and let's have a Grecian romantic experience, right? So we booked the Greece trip. Now, the one thing I noticed the most that I highlighted here is, of course, the sun connecting to the North Node, lots of energy for my nodal mission, you know, and mind you, at the time of this, I wasn't deeply studying nodal transits. This was really happening and unfolding organically for me as I was doing all of this. I want to point that out too. Now, the next chart is when I arrived in Greece. Now, when I arrived in Greece, I had done my Italy trip. And on my Italy trip, I was told that I could have the job if I wanted it, but something inside of me felt absolutely not. And I wanted to do my own thing. I totally felt like I had it in me to start my own company, to do my own workshops. I also knew that I deeply wanted to pursue astrology, and I didn't want to write other people's stories anymore. I wanted to write the stories of the cosmos. I wanted to help people write their own stories, you know. So this was all happening in Greece. And on this particular day, the day I got to Greece, I quit my job back in the States, absolutely abruptly. And I told my partner, who had arrived the same day, that I wasn't sure that I wanted to be living our lifestyle, and that I thought I had maybe wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I wanted to be a teacher, and I wanted to share my wisdom with people, so that I could cry talking about it, because it was a huge conversation that I wasn't planning on having. You know, Jupiter was conjunct South Node here. Yeah. And at this time, I knew that starting my own business would mean, number one, a commitment to being a lifelong student. You know, we can't be astrologers and not learn continually. Right. So I knew it would mean more education, more work on my part. I knew that it would just mean continuing of that. And I also at this time made a really solemn commitment to teach. I had recognized this day in Greece that there were a lot of fundamental things that no one taught me about life, things that I learned through the cosmos, through astrology. And I just decided I want to teach people what I know. And I want to teach people how to enjoy astrology and hopefully in the way that I do. So all of this was forming for me in a really, really intense way. And then the next chart, of course, is for June 21st of the same year. And this was the date, the official filing of my LLC. So I did decide to become an entrepreneur, to start my own LLC. A couple days after this, my relationship with my partner did end. I moved into the first place I had ever lived in by myself as an adult without roommates, my name on the lease, all the adulting things. And as you can see, I was in the almost exact inverse nodal return, but during the exact time I was like doing this paperwork and getting all my ducks in a row. This just happens to be the actual day. And I just thought it was really fascinating, you know, the entire chart, but just to see how quickly things really did move for me in the course of 5 months. Yeah. Now, none of that was easy. I know that what you're hearing right now might sound a lot like a highlight reel. But there was some B-roll in there, and C-roll and D-roll and E-roll and F-roll. I went all the way to Z and back 5 million times. It wasn't easy when, like I said, when destiny and fate comes calling and we answer that call, you know, the biggest thing for me was that the people in my life were really surprised. You can't initiate all these huge changes in life and not anticipate people to not have a reaction. So that was my big thing of my inverse nodal return, was dealing with sort of the reactions from other people, and then just trying to remain grounded enough to continue with my plan, despite the fact that pretty much everyone told me not to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh. And that is, thank you for pointing that out, because I talk about it a lot on this channel, so they're probably like so tired of it, but informing my business and taking these leaps, that when fate comes around, there were so many tears involved, and there was the self-doubt, but the faithful moving anyways. There were the conversations where I had to stop talking to my family about building this cool business because I realized I was meeting their fear and taking them hostage. I had to actually go expand out and meet new people and talk to other astrologers about how to build this and do this. So it is not just like, you know, the nodes come around in whatever form and fashion and I landed. That's not been my experience, but it's also not been my experience that I have this evolved spiritual maturity without doing human actions that create that maturity. You know what I mean? So along the way, if you're listening and you're like, look, Stormie, this nodal return is not my favorite. We understand, but also like, what is it showing you? What's illuminating for you? Where's the silver lining in what's going on? Because it's still your destiny check-in, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I would say too, you know, around the time when I did file this LLC, I moved through a lot of insecurity. Who am I to do this? How did I just start an LLC? Why did California just do this for me? They must have made a mistake. Things like that. I moved through so much not enoughness during my inverse nodal return. I really did.
Absolutely. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, me too. I'm like, oh my gosh, even getting married to my husband, who we both are just so tickled about each other. I was like, oh my God, and him too. Like, oh my gosh, is this the thing? Like, am I going to be enough for you? All of those things came up. They just didn't stay, you know, and that's the difference in, I think, evolving with the returns, is that they didn't stay. And we were like, oh, we are just weird human beings and let's go get married, you know? And that's what all of the things.
And I also found for myself personally, and I've heard this from clients as well, some maybe inner child insecurities or like just a couple childhood things coming up. And, you know, I think that also has to do just when we're decision making. There's a lot of different reasons why that could come up. But I felt really connected to my inner child during my inverse nodal return, where I remember as a child, I would always play school and I would be the teacher. I would always be looking at astronomy. And I do remember feeling a deeper connection with inner child during my inverse nodal return, even if that was through like shadowy triggers.
Yeah.
But I also too, you know, on this slide, I write illuminations from the South Node. Now, Stormie, let me know what you think. But for me, with my inverse nodal return, I feel like my South Node was activated in a way that, like you said, life is forever changed. Like it's never the same. But there were gifts from South Node energy that I felt come in the inverse nodal return.
Oh yeah, I agree. So obviously my South Node is in Capricorn, and I definitely got to see some things that they were outdated ideas of what things should look like. And my South Node lives, of course, in my 5th house. So ideas of who I had to be as a mother, what my children's lives need to look like, what is that I'm allowed to be passionate and joyful and be pleasureful about. Even the ideas for me, some of them that came up was the fact that I am solid at business and that does bring me pleasure, and that somehow that is not acceptable. And I got to roll and work with that as well. But instead, it's like you said, when it's brought to the surface and into the light, we can see it for what it is and kind of sift through what's still usable and what is okay to die off. And that's when I found out, because just a few years later is when I launched Stormie Grace. And today, if you look in the astro community, a lot of the articles that I write are how to do astrology and business, because I did get the gift of understanding that level of mastery and how do we take the woo-woo field per se and wrap it in spiritual business. So the issues with that South Node came up, but also the gifts came up as well.
Yeah. And, you know, I always think of the South Node as like, you know, maybe energies we've mastered in past lives. So our past masteries, talents, gifts, those things are so useful to know, particularly if you're moving through insecurity or you have found some newfound confidence and you want to know, where should I put this? You know, what am I naturally good at? I also love the South Node for showing us those subconscious or unconscious patterns that might need to be released a little bit or worked with or worked through, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and so like one of the ideas too around that South Node being in my 5th house space was that I was not able to give my children everything I thought they should have. And it illuminated my North Node, which was like, my children are fine and I am not their everything. They are students of the world just like I am. And that was a really big, like, personal mom level release for me. And that is, you know, you talk about this ongoing healthy relationship with that South and that North Node. And that was a definite integration with me. And the way that I just move around that stuff is completely different today. And I have just so much, like, I have so many clients that are moms, and we have the mom conversation a ton. And what does it mean to be spiritually fit and healthy around your relationship with being a human and a mom? So kind of cool.
Yeah. And I think also you reminded me with my South Node, I did think, oh, well, I can't be like a travel writer or, gather people unless we're doing it in all these different parts of the world.
Right.
But my North Node in the third, no. I work from home. I work within my local community, so like for me, it wasn't about satisfying that need to be nomadic. It was actually about going to the roots of my local communities and working from there and then building my own community online, which is what I do. So I love what you brought up about your South Nodes. It reminded me of one of my own little South Node gifts that came up for me.
Yeah, it's pretty good, right? Because I look at too, like from the North Node, I got married, I did all of that kind of stuff. That's cool. And then just a couple years down the road, we launched a free YouTube academy. Right. And that is just so to me, because I've always laughed. I'm like, well, with the North Node in Cancer in the 11th house, I'm like the best kindergarten teacher ever. Right.
Yes.
And so it's like, it feels like the fullest expression of that node, like gathering a tribe and gathering a family and creating a community of teachers, creating a community of students, and then throwing it online so that we can grow and create security of good information together, so it's like, I just want to stress too that sometimes the event happens at the nodal return or the nodal transit, but then what comes from it that maybe you can tangibly like see and dig into even years later.
Yeah, it is such an unfolding. And even just the 5 months I shared with everyone here, that was such an unfolding, and it's still continuing to unfold, and I think that sometimes we do start things during nodal transits where it is our fate and our destiny to be doing these things. And so even just reveling in how good that feels, that satisfaction that I trusted my inner self and went for something, that's something even simply we can enjoy. And I believe too, during nodal transits, I don't believe it's possible to choose the wrong thing or to make a mistake. I really don't.
Yeah. That's what I tell people all the time. I'm like, okay, look, here's the thing. You really can't screw this up, because I promise anywhere around your nodal time, especially if you pick the path that is not the path, I think it's like we run into an internal electric fence. It's like, hold on, I am in the wrong place. And I just think that the universe is kind and divine and involved in every decision that we make. So I too do. I think to screw this thing up.
Yeah. And I also feel that the nodal transits are so potent that they really are kind of these agents of rerouting us. So even if you're moving through your nodal transit and you do get rerouted, it's like the nodes are there to just continually reroute you as you move through the process. It's not like you only get one little interaction with the node at the exact time and then it's gone forever. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and you've got some slides to take us through, right? Let's take let's go through.
Yes. So I would love to go through all 12 signs for our South nodes today. And again, we can activate our South nodes anytime. So whether you're using this information for future or present nodal transits or just to get acquainted with your South node, what I did was I made some slides for Stormie and I to look at and talk with everyone about. And it's about what to embrace. Because so often I think we're told to release the South node and to release things about the South node. And while that is an option, obviously, I love working with the concept of embracing for the South node. So right away with Aries, what I have here is cooperation, awareness of others' needs, giving support without expectation, sharing through leadership, and taking the initiative. Any comments on Aries?
I just want to say this in case we have people who are a little bit newer, maybe. We're talking about having an Aries South node. And so that means that you're going to have a Libra North node. So that's where some of these concepts will come in as well, is the integration between those. So when we're talking about nodes, we're talking about them in being polarities. Just in case you're new and you're listening, that's kind of what we're talking about too. But I do agree with all of those things, because Aries is typically like, well, I'll just go it alone. So it's like, oh, hold on. Let's pull this together. So yeah.
Yeah, and for anyone who's just getting acquainted with the nodes, I always think of the nodes as possibly working together in a symbiosis,
Mhm.
if you will. Like they're there with each other versus against each other or one or the other.
Right.
Okay, so Taurus, what to embrace for the Taurus South node? We have boundaries, beautiful gratitude, esteemable foundations, material creations, and then persistence and loyalty for Taurus to embrace.
Yeah. So that'll put us as a Scorpio North Node. And I'll tell you what, I feel like Scorpios have beautiful boundaries. Like they're like my space,
Mhm.
like there's a real strength in that. So learning to integrate these two, but both, this is an axis with Taurus and Scorpio that demands loyalty. It really does. So this is one where either side of that, you're going to really feel that pull towards something being very, very loyal in your life. So it's very cool.
I love that loyalty piece. Okay, so Gemini, what we have to embrace here for Gemini: skillful communication and approaches, active listening, mental and intellectual pursuits, those exciting pursuits of the mind for Gemini, opening the pathways of logic and observation.
Mm-hmm.
So these are all things that, most Geminis love. And so if this is your South node, some of this might feel familiar. But it is about opening, with Gemini South node, opening yourself, opening your mind.
Yeah, and I do think if you have a Gemini South node, like give yourself some grace if you feel really comfortable doing multiple tasks at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
as long as that does not impact the quality of what's being done or other people while you're doing that. Embrace that. Don't try and shut that down. That may be actually something that is a wonderfully developed skill of yours. But I have like prominent Mercury, so I'm like, so I
Yes.
celebrate that.
Yes, I'm the same. I celebrate it too. Mm-hmm.
I know people are like, how do you put out so much content? I'm like, oh my God, if you had any idea how much I love being that level of busy, you'd understand.
Stormie, I'm the same. I'm Jupiter in the 6th in Gemini, and I just can't stop. I won't. Content for life, everyone.
Yeah, it's wonderful when you're comfortable in that energy. So
yeah. Yes, absolutely. And moving it over to Cancer, what to embrace for the Cancer South node: healthy boundaries when nurturing, intuitive problem solving, honesty and full disclosure, noticing emotions, and building a space of security.
mm-hmm. I just have nothing to add. Those are perfect.
Yes, awesome. And so let's move it over then to Leo. So Leo, what should we embrace for Leo South node? Gathering and connecting, awareness of equality, seeing special superpowers in others, the power of the heart center. And then this part is so important for Leo South node, or really any Leo placement, but self-validation and affirmation.
Yeah, I agree with that 1000%, because it's this idea that just because it's your South node doesn't make it wrong. And the Leo portions of our chart need self-validation. They need to be affirmed in what they're doing. That's where we need a little bit of applause and to know that we do something really well and really big in whatever way that is. And when we do not feed the South node in the right ways, I think it's really hard to access the integration with the North.
Yes. Yes. I love what you just said about feeding the South node.
Oh yeah, because it's hungry. I assure you. Your South node wants your attention.
Taurus rules my 5th, so we can talk about food, eating, all the things all day long. I'm here for that. I'm like, did someone just say food? Are we eating?
I know. It's so funny. That's why we have eat and greets, because I'm like, oh,
Love it. It's the best. And speaking of stomachs, digesting, how about Virgo? So Virgo South node, what to embrace: participation, creating routines, moderation, self-confidence through experience, and then noticing and valuing the details. So as a Virgo South node, I, in the past, would shy away from details because they would stress me out. And so as part of integrating my South node and feeding my South node is giving myself permission to Virgo out. to notice and value the details. That's a big one for this. And then also when I say participation for Virgo South Node, that's just really, to me, the opposite of the hermiting that can sometimes happen.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that, in the idea of accessing that Pisces North Node, which I believe is trusting with childlike faith that the things are going to work out, it's a little bit easier to believe that things are going to work out when there is a system or a process to get to the next thing in place. You know what I mean? And so I think that that is, again, a wonderful integration of both of them, to acknowledge maybe I do create good routines or good strong processes, and through that process I can just trust that the universe built me to be able to do these things and watch them unfold. So it's kind of a neat place in the in-betweens of those two.
Yeah, and I think it's a good testament to free will also, because with Pisces North Node, it's like go with the flow, but it's much easier to go with the flow, like you said, when there's a plan. And so sometimes, you can go too far into the North Node side. And so here I love the integration piece as well with the details for Virgo. Now moving into Libra. Okay, so Libra embracing. I love this first piece that I wrote for Libra. I wrote intentional independence for Libra to embrace. Awareness of self, heartfelt agreements. That one feels really nice. Putting yourself out there, and then leading by example for Libra South Node.
Yep, I would agree, because that Aries North Node is trying to get your attention. And I love the evolved understanding of Libra is that we can only go so far on our own. We do need to partner at times, but what part of our partnering switches to be a codependent connection as opposed to an interdependent? And I think that that's what this nodal axis asks us to understand in a very conscious agreement, right? That create an interdependence in what you're doing, and then you can honor both sides of those nodes.
Yes, beautiful. Thank you so much for that. And Scorpio South Node, what to embrace: self-discipline, constructive changes, calculated risks that lead to growth, awareness of the shadow, and looking at the root of things, kind of just tracing things back down to the root. Where do they come from?
Right. Well, and I just laugh with Scorpio South Node, because that Scorpio South Node does need to convince that Taurus North Node why we're making changes, right? They are both, this is a fixed axis, but one is earth and one is water. So there needs to be a convincing of why we're making any kind of changes in the first place. So understanding that Scorpio, that's a detective level energy. You can look at why this is happening and where it comes from. And that is much easier to integrate with that stubborn bull at the top, right?
Yes.
The other thing is, once a Taurus energy, or certainly a Taurus North Node, puts something in motion, it is very hard to stop it. So it does need to be intentional.
Thank you so much for sharing that intimate piece about your nodal process.
Yeah. It's a whole bag of chips out here.
Okay, so Sagittarius South Node, embracing direct communication, learning, teaching new knowledge, travel and movement, big picture envisioning, like really being that visionary. And then, of course, freedom and adventure for Sagittarius.
Yeah, and many people would have been experiencing their nodal returns under Sag and Gemini this year. So that's very exciting. So I'd be interested to hear from you guys out there, if you did have any one of your nodal transits happening this year from Sag and Gemini, what your experiences have been, because it's been your time for just a little bit here.
I'm so curious as well, which is so typical for this axis, curiosity. Definitely curious of some nodal return or inverse stories. And for Capricorn, so Capricorn South Node, the number one thing I wrote to embrace here is dismantling the hustle. This idea that things maybe need to be hard in order to be productive or of value, the healthy work-life balance, work-life relationship, positive influence and assertion, keeping commitments and promises, and then accountability with self and others. These are again, for the Capricorn South node, and also things that, keeping commitments and promises to me is very Cancerian, very nurturing. So we see some glimmers of that in here as well.
Absolutely. And it's Stephen Forrest talks about these particular energies between Capricorn and Cancer. And I just think they're very funny. And he says, you have a friend who's sick, and Cancer says, oh my gosh, I've just been very busy, but I'm going to make my way there. I'll do it no matter what. And Capricorn's like, yeah, I understand that they're sick. I sent a card. I have other things to do in my life. And Cancer looks at Capricorn and is like, I can't believe you're not going to go. Right. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, that is definitely this axis where Capricorn is like, yeah, no, I don't feel highly obligated emotionally to get on board with this whole thing. So it's just a very funny way, I think, that he described them that helps me, since this is my axis, to think about where my obligations and commitments are and how to navigate that.
I love that. Okay, so Aquarius, getting to the end of the line here, Aquarius South Node. So embracing individuality, that classic Aquarius trait, following a collective goal, self-expression and uniqueness, and then collaborative projects and relationships with others. And I would say an operative word, and that last part is relationships with others, really embracing that part.
Yeah, because you can't, it's like, on the Leo Aquarian axis, Leo has to put on the show, but you've got to have an audience, and you can't have an audience with no performer. So it's needed. The self, the me and the we have got to kind of find their integration here for sure.
Oh yeah, this is the me and the we, definitely. And last but never least, Pisces. So Pisces South Node, embrace being non-judgmental, the deep human psyche and the unknown, connection or connecting to the higher self. Usually that's like through meditation, hypnosis, spirituality, mysticism. Embrace trusting the timing of life. And then, of course, embrace riding those spiritual, emotional waves.
Yeah, and I like it. I have a couple clients who have this particular axis as well, and I like it because I'm like, yes, you got to go into that deep place of childlike faith, but you also have to do the laundry. Like, you must, right?
Yes.
No judgment. Everybody who has clothes has to do laundry, even if they're a spiritual being. That's okay. It's okay.
Yes.
To me, it's just, I think this axis makes me giggle a little bit because it's really the place of like, everything is everything and something has to be material, right? So it's a really neat place to put them both into practice.
Yeah, this is my axis as well. And it's definitely a practice in riding the waves, for sure.
Yeah. Sure. Which is it? Yes. What is emotion and what is a spiritual awakening, right?
Yes. Oh, yes. And it's so funny just, riding our own, I guess, waves of our nodes, and then also just feeling the nodes in the sky. And so that's why I always like to remind everyone that, and why we made this list, right? It's like, because we can tap into this anytime, despite being in a transit or despite where the nodes are in the sky. And we might even notice the nodes in the sky are activating our nodes or eclipses as well.
Absolutely, because we're talking about nodal transits right now, but the rest of those beautiful celestial bodies are moving as well, and they will come to engage those nodes. Or, we'll have a transiting node hit an angle of your chart, and that is going to tell a completely different story and shake the whole thing up. So there's lots of conversation, I think, and opportunity, like you said, to embrace what's happening over here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also really wanted to speak on the South Node because I do find that it can be, in the natal chart, a point of empowerment, emotionally, mentally, in all the ways, really.
All the ways. Yeah. Oh my gosh. In this last year, it was super embracing that Capricorn South Node has been a game changer and left me a clear path of other things in my home and in my career that are points of availability that I can help. And so embrace it. Like there's good things down there as well, for sure. So Yay, we got through all 12. And so hopefully you guys, as you're watching or you were listening, you heard something from our experiences, or you saw something in the slides that's making you kind of rethink and go home to your internal self and connect with your nodes and what that looks like. And definitely, if you've never taken time to get pen and paper and write down the ages of these nodes and see what was going on in your life, oh my gosh, do it, because it is illuminating. Oh, it's illuminating. For sure. And it's so funny because I know sometimes I'll sit with clients and they're like, okay, wait, hold on. What year was that? I'm like, oh, I know. Now we're into the math, right? Like we got to get into the math of it, which is just always a funny human connection anyways, because everybody like closes one eye. Like that's going to help us find that date. It's like, okay.
Wait, it doesn't?
Exactly. Oh my gosh, Raquel, thank you so much for coming and sharing with us today, and your beautiful slides and your knowledge and your vulnerability. I appreciate you 1,000%.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you too. And I also appreciate just everyone for taking the time to listen and to tune into astrology today.
I know we had some little astro chat and astro snack in our lives today, and that feels really good to be a part of the people who are putting this out there in the world. So we are proud and happy to have you back anytime you'd like to come on back. So
thank you.
Keep us posted. And before we go, I know it's on all of your slides, but can you just tell people where they can find you?
Sure, of course. So I am at astrologywithraquel.com, Instagram, Astrology with Raquel, and you can also go to astrologywithraquel.com/Estrella if you are looking for my newest offering, which is for cosmic entrepreneurs.
Oh my gosh, awesome. All right, you guys, so I'll also make sure this information is below the video, so make sure you reach out. And if nothing else, just leave Raquel a comment in the comment section down below. All right, you guys, hopefully in this last hour or so, we gave you something that is worth the time you took to show up. And I most certainly think that we did. And I look forward to seeing you guys in the next meet and greet that we have. You can check it out on the calendar at stormiegrace.com, where you can see everybody who's coming, speaking I'm doing, events that are coming up in the astro community, just all the goodness so you don't miss out on anything. All right, you guys, I love you, and I'll see you next time. Bye.